I had a couple of questions come up that I'm curious about when you were speaking. Firstly was, actually the second one was, when you went through all this transformation.
Welcome to the Charlie Carrel podcast.
Oh, sorry.
All good, man. All good. We have a conversation. You can also ask all the questions that come to your mind, man. Today on the show, Charlie Carrel. Man, that was a deep episode. I'm still speechless. I don't think he needs any further introduction. He has been crushing online high stakes and live high stakes tournaments, 100Ks, 50Ks. And today he is on the show and he shares a little bit his journey from the last couple of years. He is now engaging more in charity projects. He has his own project, Thrive, which is very interesting. And of course, I would call him Mr. Exploitative himself, is going to share his take on playing exploitative versus playing GTO poker and what made him so successful. And it not only about poker but also in terms of a very holistic approach. We talk about shadow work and self-healing. It was a very deep episode. I'm still kind of I don't know how to say it. I'm still a bit baffled, or a lot of his input really made me think about things. So I highly recommend you watching it. And of course, if you do enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe so we share content like this into the world if you think it makes an impact. I mean, these are the daily steps we take, and we use the social media for good. And I appreciate the support, because this the only way is because of you guys are supporting it. The way we can expand, we can grow and make the world a better place. That's basically what is it about, right? So without further ado, let's jump right into it, and I hope you're going to be enjoying this episode. So here we go, Charlie. It's a pleasure having you finally, after you dodging my messages on Instagram.
It's good to be here, man. And just to be clear, we are recording right now.
Yeah, we're recording, of course.
It doesn't say on Zoom. I guess you're recording on OBS or something. Just to be clear, I did not see the first message you sent.
It's all good. Just teasing you. We actually already started talking about a very interesting topic that I think not only we as a poker player struggle, and I think a topic that is a lot can relate to when it comes to people trying to talk you down, because I brought it up that you also enjoy singing, and I saw you singing on stream, and then you brought up that you recorded a Christmas album for your grandma and you got quite some heat for it. And what I get to realize is that very often when, try out different things, usually the response from poker players is, stick to poker. And this can feel very...
Poker, you play cards. In my head, you're nothing but a card player. Teach me stuff for free. It's really consistent. And I understand why people do it. And we live in a world where expression and vulnerability is quite rare. Mm-hmm. And authenticity is very rare inside people. So if somebody does want to do something like express themselves in terms of, I saw on your Instagram, it's pretty much the only thing I know about you, actually, apart from what other people have told me, is that you are a big proponent of veganism. Now, I bet you've had a lot of slack for that from the poker community, because
of course.
I've tried speaking about all of the topics under the sun, publicly and to friends and to whatever, and I found the number one thing that gets people riled up is nutrition. Everyone thinks
absolutely
about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a vegan myself. Just because I think the major problem is that we really struggle admitting that we're too weak to change for something. It's like, I still have a piece of meat here and there, but I do believe that veganism, and even if it's only 20-30% of your diet contains vegan ingredients, and I think that would already be a huge step. And I have to admit, sometimes I'm simply too weak. I've been raised in a way where meat was always a big part of nutrition, or of our meals, and so I have a hard time cutting it out, especially when we're together with people. But I also try to, as much as I can to eat vegan. And I think sometimes people actually deep down, they know that something is wrong the way we treat animals and it's not so sustainable. But then, they try to cover it with some fake strength and like, I don't need this, we need to eat meat, being all fake strong. And but we also need to show some compassion for those who eat meat, because if we just attack them, and I actually realized also a lot of negativity amongst the vegan community that attack everyone that just try to make a little step, and this is simply not the right way.
Yeah, it's that art's holier than thou attitude which creates so much division. And personally, I'm not vegan. I've been on and off vegan. I don't like the label so much for the reasons that you said. I prefer to just describe it more kind of granulated. But I'm curious. Do you support veganism for mainly the moral aspect instead of the nutritional?
Both. I realized how much more energy I have. I'm literally every time I go on a more consistent vegan diet, even if it's 80-90% vegan diet, and here and there I have some cheese or whatever, I'm breaking all my
cheese is just off my radar for years these days. Yeah. My body does not do well with that. But for me, from a moral standpoint, veganism isn't like the epitome. I think things like factory farm are abominable. Perhaps we'll look back at this in 100 years and be like, what the fuck were people doing? That's just torture. But for me, if somebody like a hunter in Papua New Guinea caught a wild gazelle, I don't know if they're a gazelle in Papua New Guinea, and they took it home for their family to eat, to me, that's a completely morally neutral or perhaps even positive thing. Where do you stand on that?
I haven't really thought about that. I mean, the most common argument I get to hear is, we are meat eaters. We are used to hunt. We used to just meat all the time. But when you look into some sources, it's actually not true. It's not that every single time we went out that we were hunting or, we got to hunt a prey. Usually we failed. So then we got to eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds. That was our main resource back in the days when we were hunting. I mean, back in the days in terms of before industrial revolution took place. So I think it's a big misconception that people thought we were just eating meat all the time. And our bodies are not designed to consume so much meat as we do today. So that definitely got way too much out of proportion. And I agree with you. And listen, I remember 1 year ago we were fishing, and it was so hard. It was so hard to me that what you actually eat on a daily basis, perhaps, like fish or tuna or whatever, and it's just so hard killing a fish. I was like, actually, if you want to eat meat or fish, you should do it for yourself. And then you probably realize how hard it is, and you actually don't want to do that shit. And that also means that you don't want anyone else to do it for you. So then you might reconsider your consumption.
So apart from veganism, what other things have you spoken about that have got you a bit of flack?
The nutritional aspects, health aspects, that people think, if you cut out meat, you miss out on essential proteins and other important nutritional things. And as I said, it's morally totally fine, because we always used to hunt animals and we're the strongest species. These kind of things, which I think are not.
I mean, the question was more like, have you spoken about other things like meditation or
of course,
politics? I don't know what you speak about.
More, I think meditation, because it's closer to poker. It's a good question, something we talked about, right? It was more also about business. When I started talking about, I have a channel like Bencb where I talk about more health, nutrition, business, everything else around poker. It has nothing to do with poker. I was like, now he starts talking business. I actually got a pretty big business with more than 20 people working for us. So I would say I got some experience when it comes. I made a lot of mistakes that I want to share, so people don't fall into the same pitfalls. So now, when you mentioned that you were recording songs for your grandma for Christmas, which is, by the way, like probably the most epic idea for a Christmas gift that I've ever heard. I think when your grandma hears it, she probably lost the feed.
She already heard it. She loved it. She loved it so much. I had to look at her watch it over Zoom, which was sad because Corona stuff. But it was such a gorgeous moment for our family.
I can imagine. Yeah. What else was for you? Mentioned meditation, that people, and also maybe something you can share from your journey and experience. Probably also when you transitioned into poker player, you probably have received a bit of like negativity maybe in your family and your friends. How do you deal with let's call it haters, naysayers, when you want to dive into a new project? And of course, when we start something new, we really suck at it. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I guess I could answer that by kind of decompartmentalizing two sides of it. There's one side which is my internal work, which there are parts of me which really haven't in the past reacted well to hatred or negativity or cruelty or things like that. And I know that all stems back to when I was younger, and there are some really deep-seated traumas kind of implanted in me from a young age. So a lot of it is doing inner work, working through trauma, doing lots of different types of meditation, doing lots of different types of energy work, and then also kind of like self-therapizing or therapizing with my partner or something like that. The second part of it is more like a strategy. And like, for instance, when I'm speaking publicly about meditation, I can say, hey guys, this is what I think about meditation. And I'll get loads of people saying, fuck you. And I'm like, fair enough. Okay, let me rethink this one. And then I'll come back with, hey guys, I found that in poker, meditation has been really helpful for me. And people are like, wow, really? Maybe I should try that. And obviously I'm generalizing it here, but that seems like, put my finger to the hateful winds. And it seems to be that as long as I relate something back to poker, people will actually listen to what I have to say.
Yeah.
Which is irrational on their part. Like, I'm not just a poker player, just like you're not just a poker player. We are individuals that have many, many different foibles and idiosyncrasies. But for some reason, that when people paint us as a poker player in their heads, they put us in this little box.
Yeah.
They don't like us stepping out, or I say there's a small percentage of people don't like us stepping outside of that box.
Yeah.
So I like it. It's a strategy. It's like if you were to be in a book that I'm reading at the moment, somebody gets put in the middle of like a slave camp, and he's this really enigmatic and charismatic figure. And at first he's like, come on guys, we can do this really well. We can get out of this situation. Everyone's like, fuck off. Yeah. So he's thinking about it strategically, like, oh, okay, how do I get on their side? Obviously speaking like this didn't work. How do I think about that? And I love that mentality of just like, you're born into a world with really broken people, including both of us. Like, we're just broken. It's a very broken society at the moment. And trying to figure out how to get through to people with love and compassion, but strength at the same time. It's just really fun for me.
Yeah. I love that strategy. Yeah, it's pretty smart. It would be as if I would say then, veganism has really helped me in poker to be more energized, to be more focused. Like, oh wait, what?
Right? Reducing gun laws has really helped me in poker.
Yeah,
it's really stretching.
That is a very smart approach. So I also saw that you have a project called Thrive. Mm-hmm. Would you like to share a little bit more on what is happening there? What is it about? How can we support it? What's the purpose of it?
Thanks for bringing that up. And Thrive is the main reason that I've stepped away from poker for the last few years.
Yeah, I saw you're not playing a lot anymore, right?
Barely at all. I played a bit a couple of nights ago, and I'll speak about that in a bit because it was really interesting what happened. But Thrive is my project. I started out with a different project called Abundance, and I realized that it was too large and too complicated for people to be able to trust and for people to be able to get behind at first. So I said, okay, I'm going to put that on the back burner. So I've got a second project in the future called Abundance. But Thrive is my charity that I'm launching this year. We're just about to get charitable status, just have to jump through a few more bureaucratic hoops. And what we're aiming to do is ending homelessness within the UK by 2025. And speaking as somebody who's very into probabilities, rationality, things like that, I think we have a really damn good chance of doing it. And it's a system that's got a few different areas, including data analysis. We've got a media push that we're going for before pre-launch, and then post-launch we have a political strategy. And then there's two elements, one of which is we're going to be coming up with our own shelters, because the current shelter system is really not very good at healing people and getting people off the street.
Yeah.
And firstly, what we're going to be launching first is an app, which is going to enable the user, anyone around the world, or whether it's in person or from their home, to be able to donate money to an individual person that's homeless on the system. That money can only then be spent on food or shelter or mental health care. So imagine you're walking past somebody on Oxford Circus, which is in London, and they're holding up a sign that says, okay, you can donate to me via the Thrive app. My name is John Sparks, and my number is 3281 or whatever. You would then be able to find that person on the system. The person that's homeless doesn't need the app. You could donate, say, £13, which would give that person a night off the street. And you could do that as many times as you wanted. And the system that we've come up with, it's unexploitable. Other people can't use it. It incentivizes people that are homeless to, advertise us. Like, I really believe that if you want to change the world, one needs to understand incentive structures. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're incentivizing the user to now give because they know their money can't be spent on destructive means. We're incentivizing the suppliers, so the shelters or the restaurants, to advertise us because they now get a new income revenue. And thirdly, we're incentivizing the people that are homeless to advertise for us because we're offering them, or we're facilitating the ability for them to get as much help as they need with the basic necessities. And I believe that this app alone will be absolutely world-changing, because when we prove that it works in London, we can spread to the UK, and then we can spread globally, because as long as we can get through the different regulations of the countries. Because one thing that charities I don't think have really done before is technological innovation, in the sense of you can build a brick and mortar charity and you can spend millions of dollars and you'll barely get across the country. If you make a technology-based charity, that shit can go global, and you probably only need like 30 people working for you. And that's one of the ways that Thrive is intending to solve homelessness in the UK. And if we manage that will just be the beginning. And in terms of helping, we're not taking donations apart from very like friends and family donations. Like a couple of big name poker players have donated already, which is lovely. Because we haven't got charitable status yet, which means we can't make a charity bank account. Mm-hmm. So everything's being personally funded right now. So I'm putting my own money into it. And so if somebody were to donate, it would kind of just go into my bank account, which I'm never going to ask people to do. I love that a couple of people have already, but I'm never going to ask for that. Yeah. One more thing worth noting, and you can move on after this if you want, but it's...
No, I find it incredibly interesting. I have actually more questions.
Oh, good. Perfect. One thing I think is really worth noting is that there's such a huge lack of trust from the public sector to the charitable sector. And that's for a bunch of different reasons. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a charity, first of all, where 100% of the donations that are meant to go to the people that are homeless go to the people that are homeless. So that's 100% efficiency, which you never really find in pretty much any charitable sector. Secondly, I'm never going to take a single penny from Thrive or Abundance or any of the charity work. I'm never going to pay myself a wage. And the people in the inner circle, the trustees, the same. I'm going to pay people's wages, obviously, with the, if I hire a tech guy or whatever. But nobody's going to be getting rich off this project. And I think that if you could solidify trust from public to charitable sector, that would the effects of that would just be exponential. People are always looking for a reason not to give away their money, and that little thing. Oh, I heard that Oxfam did this, and I heard that. It's enough to sway. You know, in poker, when you're not sure about a decision, you're like on the final table bubble, and because you're not sure, that's when emotions can trickle in. And you get to find out who someone really is, in those moments. Like, okay, logic doesn't tell me what's right here. So if you're the kind of person that wants to put your balls on the line and say, fuck it, you're going to put your balls on the line and say, fuck it. If you're the kind of person that wants to knit up and try and get sixth place, that's probably going to happen. It's the same thing, I think, when people are trying to donate money or something like that, that they don't have the logic to be able to comprehend this multivariate analysis. So the emotions will just trickle in and make the decisions for them.
Yeah. Why did you choose supporting homelessness, or not supporting homelessness, fighting homelessness, of course?
Fighting, annihilating. Okay, so the reason that I chose homelessness and the reason that I chose London is very, very specific. I want to plant the seeds, and actually the logo for this charity is an acorn, and for abundance is going to be a tree. And I really believe in that analogy is really powerful, like the potency and potential energy inside an acorn. It's got this just DNA written inside of it, waiting to be something ginormous. Mm-hmm. And for that acorn, it needs to be planted in a very specific place with very specific conditions for it to grow into what it could grow into. Now, I believe that in a world of divisiveness, we can't agree on fucking anything. Like, even me and you, we seem like we're probably going to be relatively similar people in a bunch of areas. If we sat down, we'd probably disagree on like 100,000 things, you know? And in today's climate, disagreeing on something means that nothing gets done. Mm-hmm. We're in a world where, because people are disagreeing on everything, you know, no legislation gets put through on anything, and it's just completely divided. But one thing that people seem to really agree on is that, yeah, we'd like to solve homelessness. That would be pretty good. It's like that, it would help the economy, it would help people, it'd be nice. You never really get too much divisiveness around it. So I think it's the best place to start. Also, because within a modern society, they're the people that have fallen the furthest, and it makes sense to start with the people that are hurting the most. Secondly, the right conditions. I think that there are, imagine the analogy that I have in my head is like, imagine that you need water and sunlight to make this thing grow, the right amount. Now, I would say that the water would be things like money, things like accessibility to help, things like that. And London has a fuck ton of it. You need to start somewhere if you want to make a grassroots movement, in my opinion, that has a ton of money around it if you really want to make big change. And Absolutely. Second of all, I think just like a ton of compassion. That would be the sunlight to me, where I've spent a lot of time with people that are homeless in London, and I see the interactions they have. And I really do think there's this like excess compassion within the London environment where people really want to help, but they just don't know how. So I think if we could utilize that potential energy of compassion and actually create a conduit for change, I think we've chosen the right place to start.
Yeah. Oh, it really seems that you have thought it through.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a long time to be thinking about this, and it's I'm honestly, you might be able to tell, I'm so damn excited for this. I saw it and I checked it out a bit, and it seemed like a very exciting project, so I wanted to know more about it. So everyone that is listening, that is following, feel free, or I encourage you to follow this project, and once it's launched, support it as much as you can. Thank you.
I think it's gonna be exciting, and I hope it's gonna make an impact. And I really hope for you, and I hope for the project, and I hope for the world that's going to have that impact as you predicted.
Thank you. I'm curious. Do you have any like long-term ambitions? You seem like somebody that cares a lot about kindness and compassion. What are your long-term ambitions for your life in general?
Making an impact in terms of I always would, instead of providing fish to the people that need, I prefer teaching them how to fish in the first place. So for me, I always dream of tackling the educational system, which I think is just...
Except not fish, you got to teach them how to like pick corn or something.
Yeah, of course. Just an analogy. So right now we have a project where once this with COVID happened, and I also realized that a lot of people have lost jobs and not their lives, but a lot of what they have built and project and businesses due to that, and they're probably in a very fucked up position. And I thought, well, what can we do? Of course, it's really hard as a poker player, to donate money to those, if you say, hey, who's rock bottom, who needs money, can we help? You get a lot of scammy people reaching out. So we had this project we still have it, where I made an announcement on YouTube then, everyone that has hit rock bottom, feel free to reach out. I started a mentoring group, everything for free. I got like, I don't know, 600 applications, went through each of it by myself, and then we started a group where I was just trying to help them in any possible way with holding them accountable. And there were a lot of people that were really in a fucked up position. And now 1 year later, we have 10, 15 guys that really have changed their lives because I made them connect with other people that are in a similar position, and we really got back. Because once you lose stuff, you start slacking your health, your routines, it gets worse, it deteriorates. It's like a vicious cycle, right? So I saw that as an opportunity for them to hold each other accountable. We had calls and coaching sessions, and we're talking through stuff and whatever it was. And of course, I'm not an expert in everything. For me personally, once we get in a miserable situation very often, or we really struggle getting out of it, is because we don't have people that say no. At least for me, it was always good to have people, if I push it too far in certain things, if I spend too much money, that tell me, no, don't do it. And I feel like some people are lacking these boundaries. They don't have those parents. They don't have those friends, So it's always a fine balance. It's always important, of course, to have very positive and supportive people, but also you need to have those people that tell you, listen, like, shut the fuck up and reconsider what you're doing here right now. And this is what
that's beautiful.
That's what I wanted to accomplish with this group, to be that person to tell them, listen, like, you haven't updated your blog today. What's going on, man? Like, get back on track. And at some point, I think they really realized how valuable it is, that interaction with others, and to have someone that holds them accountable, that doesn't care about their excuses, why they're 5 minutes showing up too late. So I was really paying attention to these small things. And now we go into the second stage where we have another round of people applying, and actually those who initially applied and now went through 1 year of coaching and accountability become the mentors themselves. So now from the first phase of accountability, now they're responsible. So now you have to get your shit straight, because you have students, they look up to you. And I think that's really powerful. What's the best way of learning is teaching, right? If you read a book and if you explain it to you can read this book 5 times, but if you read it once and you explain it to someone, it's manifested, right? And this is, I think, what also a lot of people are missing. Like, first, the accountability to make the change, but then also to make the change permanent, to have responsibility. And this is what I'm trying now. And then maybe we go in the third phase, fourth phase. I didn't have any intention. I was like, man, I want to have, like, so many people have suffered now through coronavirus, lost their jobs, lost their businesses, all these crazy lockdowns. And yeah, so and in general, I can't really tell you where exactly to go, but for me, this life goal, this life vision is to change the educational system. We don't learn anything about meditation. We don't learn anything about taxes, man. Like, when I got into business, I had no idea about taxes. I don't know how to earn money. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't know anything about self-healing, which is so key, right? You talked about this as well. So, yeah.
I think that's ginormous. It's if we just had even like a half hour a day of teaching kids how to breathe, even something as simple as breathing or stretching or self-loving or being compassionate or something like that, I think we'd have a completely changed world. But yeah, no, I think that's incredible. I think that's actually something that I've been lacking in my life, that community aspect. Mm-hmm. Like, for me, a lot of my journey, even though I do have friends, they're kind of like scattered all over the world, and I haven't had that consistent, stable friendship group since I was a teenager. And so I really feel the disparity between my life of what it is and what it could be if I had that kind of stable, people or amount of people to keep me on track. So I really do appreciate that's probably one of the most potent things you could do for someone. And you're right, like that structure, that it could grow and it could grow, and the further it goes, the better the people who are in it are gonna do, because they're gonna be having more responsibility. And one of the people I really admire in the world is Jordan Peterson. And I really like the way that he speaks about people just taking responsibility for their own actions and for themselves. And I think that is the same kind of ilk, you know, it's, I'm going to take responsibility for these people that I have to help now. And that's going to be life-changing for someone.
Was it always for you that you realized very early on that you want to help people in need with projects or whatever? Or was it with your journey in poker that at some point you got to realize, okay, now I got the financial freedom, I got time, now I want to use it wisely and make an impact? Or how did it happen?
It's funny, I've always had that in my mind. I mean, maybe since I was about 19, 20, that kind of age. But if you'd met me when I was 20 or 19, I mean, if you met me fucking last year, I was completely different to how I am now, but especially when I was 19, 20, 21, etc. I was very, very traumatized and I had no idea. I was very hurt and I was very egotistical. If you were to meet me at the poker table, like, I wanted to crush you, you know, I would make it clear that I wanted to crush you and I thought I was the best. And, you know, you would just feel that from me. And that kind of character, even though I had it in the back of my mind, like eventually I'd like to do some charity stuff because that sounds fucking amazing. I guess it wasn't really reified into my reality, at least, until perhaps about 4 years ago, maybe 4 now, where it was actually back in my psychedelic days. I don't do psychedelics, and I advise other people not to do psychedelics these days. Back in my psychedelic days, and I had this one really powerful meditation where I basically got a lot of visions about what charitable projects I could do, and one of them was abundance, the one that I plan to do in the future, which I really do think will be absolutely world-changing. And I kind of just got told whether, you know, you could rationalize this and say it was just my psyche or whatever. I don't know. I got told, hey, you can do this. You can change the world. You can do it. And I really saw it and I understood. And at that moment, I said, okay, I'm gonna dedicate my life to this. And no matter what happens, I will be willing to put everything I have on the line to do this. And at the end of that meditation, I saw, okay, well, currently all of my energy, imagine we have like 100 units of energy, like probably like 80% of my energy was put towards poker at that point. Yeah. I was like, I can't make a charity if I'm doing that. So at that point, I decided, hey, I'm going to retire from poker from this moment. And I made the decision I am. It turns out I still needed some money. So I'm still playing some poker on the side. I'll dip in and out. And luckily when I've dipped in and out, I've made a fuck ton of money. I'm on like the biggest upswing of my life. It's very spread out. So yeah, I still play poker every now and again to keep up income and to, you know, keep myself sharp and to keep my business going, things like that. But my underlying existence, my underlying axioms of how I would approach every single moment of the day is, how can I do the best in the world? How can I reduce the most unnecessary suffering? And how can I increase the most joy? So there wasn't really like one moment, but it was transitional over perhaps the last 4 or 5 years. But that one meditation was really crucial for me.
How long was that meditation?
It was probably like 3 hours. 3 hours. Wow. Yeah, I mean, 3 hours on acid can feel like a minute, and it can feel like a week. It was a long one for sure, but it's.
Was it a guided meditation or?
No,
did you have someone?
No, it was just me by myself sitting in my room. It might have been on shrooms with mushrooms actually, but yeah, I used to do that a lot back in my psychedelic days. Just I was always fascinated by psychedelics because when I first found drugs, all I wanted to do was stretch my mind. Like I was a very rationalist person. I was very atheist, all of these different things. But I really believed that people were using such a small percentage of their mind, or like exploring such a small percentage. So I wanted to explore my mind and the universe through drugs. And when I found psychedelics, I was like, fucking yes, man. Like this is the one. And so I would take so much LSD and just sit there like meditating, exploring, thinking. And that's actually one of the things that really catalyzed my spiritual journey, and taking away the atheist labels and things like that, because I started to see the world through such a widened lens that yeah, I was looking for one thing and I found a completely other thing, but I found what I think I needed to find. Have you ever tried psychedelics?
No, not at all.
I really strongly recommend people not to. Honestly,
why not? Because I've heard a lot of people. Also, ayahuasca is something that a lot of people recommend, right? Is it considered to be a psychedelic? I have no clue about drugs, psychedelics. I'm the biggest noob you can imagine. So forgive me if I'm.
I've tried ayahuasca and I've tried peyote as well.
Mm-hmm. Is it considered psychedelic? So just so we have, what's the difference?
I think they are psychedelic substances, especially ayahuasca, but I would call them plant medicines before anything else.
Mm-hmm. Would you recommend those? Or in general, not as either?
So with something like ayahuasca, it's not my place to recommend it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that people can follow their own intuition and guidance for that. I would say that there's a lot of predatory people out there that will take advantage. So if you go to Peru and you take ayahuasca, you better fucking trust that shaman, because there's a lot of people that want to take your money, and there's a lot of people that won't be doing the right ritual and then won't be doing it in a safe environment. And it's a fucking scary ass medicine, and it can ruin you. It can break your mind. And the reason that I don't recommend LSD and mushrooms, a lot of reasons. I think that LSD is very synthesized, and when you try and recreate something that nature's already created, we always manage to fuck it. You know, we could try and recreate medicine using like antidepressants, and suddenly, you know, we have 100,000 or 100 million people across the world addicted to antidepressants. Secondly, there are a lot of dangers kind of lurking in the shadows of the psychedelic realms, and of which I do not believe that modern science has even slightly grasped. I believe there are people and cultures across the world that know a lot more about this than me. And the people that I've met that know the most about these things, that have got the kind of experience that I didn't even know existed, with managing to utilize plant medicine, so have strongly advised, like, hey, don't do this unless you know exactly what you're doing. And I don't mean like you're the kind of person that's taken LSD 50 times. I mean like you've got the knowledge from millennia passed down within your culture or your tribe or something like that, and you've trained under the guise of under the guide of a shaman or something like that. And I've had some personal experiences, and I've met other people who've had some terrible experiences. Some have ended up killing themselves from psychedelics. And honestly, I received the most traumatic experiences of my life, and it was by far on psychedelics. And I know there can be huge benefits to them, but honestly, I think people are just very ill-equipped to deal with them.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it was. But I honestly, so when I was younger, I was a lot less emotional. Like I closed off all my emotions because of my childhood trauma. All I wanted was like bad trips. Mm-hmm. I manifested that shit. I was like, I want trauma and I want bad trips. I want to see the depths and the extremities of the human experience. And I got it. I got it. So I'm glad that it all happens, but I'm still healing from some of it. I've done most of the healing work, but you know, that shit lingers.
Yeah. I mean, this is also a topic where we could probably have another podcast and talk about it for like 2 or 3 hours. In general, shadow work is something I always recommend doing. Something I've discovered also a couple of years ago. Did a lot of work with Elliot Rowe. There are different techniques. Also, I'm going to start working with a guy from New Zealand who's doing breathing work, self-healing, O2 Awakening, it's called. So if you guys want to check it out, if you look for some, they also have a lot of free material. In general, with breathing, you can do a lot of self-healing. It's really, really powerful. I do my breathing exercises every day, and I feel Wim Hof method probably the most popular, and I feel high as fuck, man. It's just so epic. If you do 2-3 rounds afterwards, you just feel so light and just natural, man. Like before my grind, it's like I'm there. Like I don't care what happens, right? You just sit there and you feel fully charged. And also when you expose yourself to the cold, if you take a cold bath, an ice bath, it's so much easier. Your mind is just there. You can take the cold. The body adjusts way quicker. It heats up internally. man, it's just we are so powerful, man. We have no clue. We have no clue on how much energy and how much potential we have within. So yeah, if you want to check that out, I can highly recommend. But in general, shadow work. When did you come across of that kind of like, you know, self-healing pro? I call it shadow work, right? We bring up our own shadows from the past, our own traumas from the childhood that define us. Was it something you came across in a book? Because it's probably something you were not aware in your 17s, or the Charlie version in the 19th in his 20s, or when he's 19-year-old on the poker table. I'm gonna crush everyone. I bet you haven't really heard a lot about shadow work back then. But when did it start for you, and how did you come across?
With shadow work specifically, I guess I was kind of weirdly doing that as a teenager without really realizing it, because for me, shadow work is a lot about like expressing and dealing with like the worst aspects of you. And when I was younger, because of that trauma that affected me and turned off all of my emotions, which include like empathy and compassion, as well as like fear and whatever, I became probably the most evil version of myself I could have been. Like, I was manipulative. I cheated on people all the time. I never did anything terrible, thank God, but I was capable of doing terrible, terrible things. I just luckily didn't want to go to prison, so that was good. And so having explored all of that and given it expression, I think I was doing a lot of shadow work. And then since then, I would say around the age of like 20, I came across a lot of these phenomena. And now I'm 27 and I've gone across the world and I've tried to meet all of the different practitioners, you know, people from different tribes, and people with, you know, modern scientific backgrounds, and people with more holistic backgrounds, and people in all of these different cultures. And I've tried to like pick and choose which ones have felt right at the time. So I've done shadow work, you know, healing inner child stuff, and different breath works, and like a few dozen other things. And I believe that we all have very, very unique paths and very, very unique ways to healing our trauma. So I would never like recommend just like one specific thing for everyone to do, or one specific type of healing. I'd say like, hey, have you tried this? I'd use my intuition and be like, hey, have you tried this? And perhaps if you don't like, perhaps try this. And I've noticed that when you advise other people, or when you guide other people, something usually sticks. Like, you can throw 5 things at them and one thing will really be like, it will really stick out to them. And I trust that. I trust that inner voice of people. And I've trusted my own inner voice for that as well. Sorry, I kind of rambled there.
That's good, man.
But it's exactly what I did. I dipped my toes in all the swimming pools, and I literally put my toes in my swimming pool. I was doing cold pool meditations during the winter. So painful, so worth it. And it's been a huge journey, and I think that people underestimate, as most people anyway, underestimate how much better their life could be if they just put the work to heal themselves and to heal the people around them. Out of interest, did you have a tough childhood or anything? Like a lot of people, usually when they become guides of other people, they've usually gone through shit themselves.
I wouldn't actually say I had a tough childhood. I had everything, like in terms of materialistic stuff. I would say I was lacking some emotional connection with, you know, important people in my life, like family wise. So, which are essential, right? You with your dad, your mom, your brother, even aunt, uncle can be a role model. Like my grandpa the dad from my mom actually had also a huge impact in my life. So we can learn a lot from them, but we can also, it can also go the other way. So the way I was raised was always very German, you know, be nice, do your shit, be on time, don't step out of your comfort zone, don't make noise, you know, and this really made me struggle in a lot of relationships later on. And also very result driven. So, you know, you had a 2, like I don't know how it is in UK. 1 is the best grade, 6 is the worst grade. You had a 2. Why didn't you have a 1? You know, it's like it was never really good enough. You know, and if you had a 1, okay, how many more did have a 1? So it's like basically putting the emphasis on the test was easy rather than, oh great, you had a 1, right? So all 5 others had a 1, so probably the test was easy. That's why you had a 1. So that kind of thing here and there, and I understand where it comes from. Back then in Eastern Germany, or the way my parents or grandparents were raised, it was a really, really rough time, and they really had to, look out for their money and be very smart about it. So I'm not blaming them, and it also certainly brought a lot of benefits because I can work really hard, I can grind, man. Like, I don't need a lot of shit, so I'm really grateful for that, and would probably never be here if this would not been the case. And but however, on the other side, I really struggled with, or I really struggled in general now when I got successful into poker, to also take breaks. Like I really had to compensate with my success. Like I really had a hard time just, all right, today I take half a day off. Like I couldn't even watch anything. So it was really hard for me to just relax. And it sounds easy. And of course I had also some other shit that I don't necessarily want to share here. So when I got into working with Elliot Rowe, and we brought that up, or actually just realizing, just in that hypnotherapy session, like I was able to connect the dots. I was like, all right, my behavior today can be traced back to a situation when I was 7 years old. It was fucking mind-blowing. Just understanding that, I was like, oh my God. And this step alone, just understanding, being able to connect the dot, was just so huge. And then of course the consistent sessions, and it's not like that you need 2 sessions a week for 1 year. Like usually it can actually go quite fast. At least it was for me, right? So, and then working with Elliot was a huge game changer for me. And then I also started working with others, and I still have 1 or 2 coaches, mentors on a consistent basis where we sit down, we talk about stuff, we maybe tap into some old experiences, traumas, incidents, whatever, and see what's, because it depends on the phase you are in your life, right? Like when you're 20, you have a different life than you was 30, 40. Other stuff comes up, and I feel like our bodies and our minds, they are on standby, and depending on which stage you are in your life, it taps into it and brings it up, and then it's your responsibility to deal with it, to do the work. And it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability. And as you said, in these days, it's really rare. It's really rare to say, okay, fuck, like, why am I like this? Why am I getting angry? Why am I so anxious? Why am I afraid to do this business? Why am I afraid to have this conversation with my spouse about an important topic? Why am I afraid to go for my dreams? Like, what is holding me back? It's like that force that is holding us back. Like, why are people getting obese even though they consciously know it's bad, right? And they have these addiction, and there is this inner voice from your, I don't know, like the 12-year-old little kid, and the parents are telling you you're not good enough. So now it keeps telling you you're not good enough. That's why you can't lose weight. And it drags you back, or it comes with such an enormous effort to push through a diet. It's insane. And we really don't understand how powerful our subconscious mind, and especially our childhood, can be.
Yeah, that's sick. And it's amazing that you've had the wherewithal to want to share all of this so quickly. It's obviously something that's relatively recent for both of us to have gone through. And one cool thing about succeeding in poker is that people listen to you. Like, for some reason, people listen to us more because we've made a fuck ton of money in poker. Whereas there's this weird like hierarchical structure that I really try and ignore. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, you'll find high stakes poker players speaking to high stakes poker players, and you'll find mid stakes poker players wanting to speak to them and like really respecting them, and then you'll find that micro stakes really respecting them, and it's like this weird hierarchy that people have created, which I try and just obliterate. I try and treat everybody absolutely equally, and give my time out equally to people, not dependent on how successful they are. But there's also a utility to that. It's like, well, now people are listening to you because you've succeeded in poker, and now you have people's ears, so you get to choose what to spread with that. I had a couple of questions come up that I'm curious about when you were speaking. Firstly the second one was, when you went through this transformation.
Welcome to the Charlie Carrel podcast.
Oh, sorry.
All good, man. All good. We have a conversation. You can also ask all the questions that come to your mind, man.
When you were going through the therapeutic transformations with Elliot and the other things that you were doing, did you go from like German reclusive emotions to more opening up?
Yeah.
And if you did, how did that affect your game?
Oh, a lot, because I was able to also accept the way certain things are, because I know it's like one of these calendar sayings, what you resist will persist. And also just me accepting, okay, that's who I am. I'm this German, very efficiency, hardworking guy. That's fine. Because I was also like, something is weird, like something is strange. No, that's me. That's my life. That's my journey. And it also released so much pressure. Where is, I don't know, show me a book that says you cannot be a hardworking German efficient guy. Well, what's wrong about it? So okay, sometimes I have a hard time maybe letting go, and it definitely got easier. Like I have such an easier time now to spending time with friends and go on vacations, and also all the other stuff that happened in my life. So that also released a lot of pressure in the first place, and also on the poker table, certainly being more okay. That I was similar as you described it. Like I try to crush everyone. I need to prove I'm better than anyone. But in poker, man, you lose so often. You lose so often.
It's a damn humbling experience.
Yeah.
especially when you play like me, because I get owned a lot. Because my way of playing is trying to own people as much as I can. And it leaves me open. Like recreational players just get the better of me all the time. Yeah. And it's because they outplayed me, not because the cards fell the wrong way. It's because I tried to exploit them and they noticed and they were like, nah. And it's very, very humbling to just get crushed every now and again.
Yeah. Something definitely also would like to talk with you about is your way of playing, or the way you used to play. I get you. I'm pretty much sure that this question you get a lot when it comes to your style of playing. You have been always an advocate of, not so much GTO, rather an exploitative style. Why do you think it's so much better for you or for others to follow a more an exploitative style than playing GTO? Or maybe also you can touch a little base on your study, or how you used to study poker.
Yeah. Okay. So there are like a million ways we could speak about this. I'll try and choose like an easy way into it. So, for instance, if I'm teaching a new poker player, or if I'm teaching anyone anything, what I want someone to do is use their own minds, learn how to think with a tiny bit of structure here and there, a tiny bit of guidance here and there, but really to make as many mistakes as they possibly can. And I truly believe like a musician is only going to be a phenomenal musician if they practice and they're not told exactly, okay, do this chord, then do this chord, then do this chord. And it's that kind of like liberty to make your own mistakes. So in terms of learning poker, I think pretty much every single one of the best poker players in existence right now started pre-GTO. And they all had that understanding of poker because they all tried out all of these different tactics and styles, and they all went ballistic and they all punted off a million stacks, and they felt what it feels like to make that stupid mistake. And I think that's an invaluable lesson that people these days, they're just not getting. Mm-hmm. They're told like, okay, just don't do this before they even tried to do it. And for me, I think that's a terrible way to allow somebody to fulfill their maximum potential. Secondly, for myself, and I'm humble when I say this, like I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure, but for myself, I believe that I can beat the people that are GTO oriented without learning or playing in the GTO style. And it's a very like semantic-y topic, very complicated, because I see someone like, I assume you're more GTO oriented based on a couple of things I saw. I see someone like you making a play and I'm like, oh, that makes loads of sense. Like that I've never thought of that. So perhaps now I'm learning from the GTO solvers and the PO solver and whatnot. And I'm inspired by that. And for me, that still can be used in my style of poker. I'm really trying to think of a best way to describe this. I think that the main difference is the thought process that goes behind it. So for me, I believe that the game theory oriented thought process is kind of a bit farcical and a bit nonsensical when it's put into practice. And I know that there's a lot of variety between the top players about how to think about poker as well. Yeah. But say, for instance, man, my head's just kind of trying to come up with like so many examples. I'm just going to choose one. Okay, say for instance that you play a strategy, and the game theory oriented strategy would be like, okay, we're not going to try and maximize the EV from all of these different hands. What we're going to do is we're going to create a balanced strategy to maximize the EV of the strategy, which is essentially what GTO is, to make it unexploitable, and then perhaps you might exploit from that. That thought process is very different to the thought process that I will go through, which is I'm going to try and maximize the EV of this hand in this given situation, but I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to get exploited, and they can't work out how I'm unbalanced in this kind of spot, which obviously isn't foolproof. Like some people will work out how I'm unbalanced in certain spots, and then I have to readjust and readjust and readjust.
Let me jump in, but I think you're right here, because in a tournament population, man, like the same spot, it never comes up again. Unless you play like a very, very high stakes pool. And we speak here for our audience that probably, is playing low or mid stakes for the majority of the players. And you have thousands, tens of thousands of players, like so many different stack sizes. How likely is it going to be that the same spot is coming? Oh, Charlie Carrel, he triple barreled me on this spot, check raised the flop on this board texture, with this deck size at this stage of the tournament, with this ICM implication. It's 1 in a billion times.
So I guess I'll just say one more thing, and then I want to pick your brains on it as well, because I really do believe that the poker community is very infantile in the way that we understand poker.
Yeah,
and every single
100%.
3 years, we look back at how they played and we're like, fucking idiots. Didn't they know that this is the right answer? And it just happens again and again and again. And we're in 5 years, we're going to look back at how we play now and be like, we didn't quite understand that.
Yeah,
like we got that wrong. So for me, what I've come across is that when a lot of game theory oriented players, and these are some of the best players in the world, have looked at a spot, they've said, this is the only good play. This is the only good size to use, because the solver says that you're losing 3 BP by going by this size. But for me, that's not quite living in reality. And I'll put the question to you if you think that I'm wrong. The solvers, first of all, they're not GTO. They're just nowhere near GTO. We haven't got close to GTO in the first place, especially for tournaments, as you said, where there's like edge that you have to take into consideration and other things.
Even ICM in the early game, I mean, most of the solves, if you add a little bit of ICM implication, it changes things. So
yeah, and I just don't believe that we could add ICM implication, because
no, not for these huge fields.
Complex thing that I wouldn't know how to start programming that. But I guess that when I see people saying like this is the good play because the solver says you're losing like 6 BB if you do this play, that to me doesn't make any sense, because the assumptions that are going on behind that are like the other person has to be playing GTO not only on this street but not on all other streets as well.
Yeah.
And it's now saying that's the EV of that hand within the strategy, whereas like, let me try and put this into words. For me, I don't believe that an EV of a hand can ever be properly calculated or even close to being calculated. Like if I were to choose in a certain spot to bet 3/4 on a turn on a draw heavy board, or like 80% or like 120% or 150%, what's going to be highest EV will be based on so many different variables that I don't believe a computer can handle it. Like it's going to be, even if they took like 3 hands and they've played it differently, now suddenly the EV of everything has changed. So I do believe there's a lot of truth that can be extrapolated from solvers, and I try and do that as much as I can from what other people say. But I do believe that there's this mass kind of, I'm trying to think of a gentler word than delusion, because it's not quite delusion because we're all deluded, but there's mass kind of like wrongness that everyone seems to be stepping in, that the only good way to think about a spot is by taking a game theory solution, then deviating from it, instead of just using your own intuition and saying, well, I've played 5 million hands of poker. I think people react to this. I think this hand makes a lot of sense because this is range. And for me, I think that what I call HBO, like human being optimal, is it has higher reaches. Like you could potentially be better than if you were to just play with the kind of game theory then exploiting style from other people. So let me know what you think, because I'm far away from certain on a lot of these conclusions.
Oh, me neither. And I think you're right. We're so far away from understanding what is actually happening in poker, what is supposed to happen. I agree with what most of you say. Like, I'm definitely not, I would not call myself someone that is trying to follow GTO. I'm using this as a baseline. I was trying to play my opponents. I'm trying to play the population. And if I make an out of line bluff, I actually had a spot 2 weeks ago where, I had a busted flush draw, and you're not supposed to bluff a lot with busted flush draws because you block their folding range. But the way their hand played, and based on my experience, I was like, he's never going to have a lot of strong hands. It would be a disaster. And I was just narrowing down on a few specific hands. And I bluffed, and he called, and he had actually a very weak hand. So my read of his line was correct, and but he just couldn't hit the fold button. And I had these spots a lot, and I was like, I'm not blaming myself. Like, I would make this bluff again because I made a play based on my experience that the solver would never be able to do. And then he tells him, because he's lacking that experience or he's lacking that human input, that he's saying, he's not supposed to bluff with busted flush draws. But this is how it is. I disagree on the very beginning of the career. I think it's really hard to try out things when you don't really know where to start in the first place. So I think let's say the first couple of weeks or maybe the first couple of months, it's good to be a bit more structured in terms of. I remember the way I started. I was just learning copying ranges, preflop ranges, and maybe in these days a little bit more GTO. Okay, let's follow some principles, but I agree with you that as soon as possible, as you got a bit of foundation, you need to start thinking. You need to also, maybe with a coach or people or posting hands, whatever, trying to understand why certain hands are not a good defend against 3-bets because people don't 3-bet enough, or against squeezes, or check jams on the river for heaps, over bets on the river. And we don't want to defend as much as the solvers want to do because it's simply under bluffed. And then start using your experience and really trying to, as you said, to use common sense. But we need a bit of baseline. This is where I think GTO can help, and also to understand, okay, if we know this is the strategy and people are not doing it, we know the counter strategy, right?
So I'm completely open to that being more right than what I think. I would say that the way that I teach poker, there's a lot of fundamental basics of poker. Like, there's rationality. We're not just like fucking play whatever you want. It's like, hey, you can learn your opening ranges, or for instance, perhaps try out for a week with your own opening ranges. Then I'll tell you what's right. So you've really understood and you've thought for yourself about these different things. So then perhaps in the future, when opening ranges have to change all the time in tournaments, you've got a better way of thinking about it. But then once they've learned that, then you learn about c-betting, then you learn about ranges, then you learn about perceived ranges. And what I like to do is I like to take it very simple, layer up, layer up, layer up, layer up. And what I found is that a lot of people when they're teaching poker is they'll tell people all of this stuff pretty much at once. Mm-hmm. And I've met dozens, and I've seen comments from hundreds of poker players that have just been confused. Like, they've just been so confused because they'll get to a spot and they'll be like, oh, so I got here, and what I thought I'd do is, because it's a dry board and I know that you're meant to bet 80% of your range, I had this blocker to that, and I had this SPR, and it's like, well, so I decided I wasn't really sure, and so I decided to check, and it's just this complete mess. And I'll just be like, whoa, slow down. Do you remember c-betting? Yeah. You're playing against a recreational player? Yeah. How often do you think he hits this board? I don't know, like one in 3 times? Ah, perfect, great. Why don't you try c-betting a quarter? How often does that need to work? Oh, that's not that often, does it? No, it doesn't need to work too often. You got equity, you can carry on bluffing. And it's really like stripping down, for me, the mess, and then only layering up when people are ready, which is, in my opinion, the only way to teach anything in a successful manner.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like this example now with the bet sizing, because this is also a human component that we're a lot of GTO brainwashed players, and I'm really sticking to that term because they're brainwashed, and I have a lot of coaches and students coming.
That's
to
even
me.
A bit too divisive for me. Damn.
Listen, like, it's fucked up, really. Like, they start trying to balance their ranges and play GTO against recreations, which is insane. So very often we can manipulate our sizings, because for recreational, unless it's an overbet versus 1/4, but there's a range where their calling range is very static. So whether you bet 15% pot or 33% pot, doesn't matter for them. Oh, it's a bet. So, you know.
Do you mean their range is elastic?
No, it doesn't change. Whatever. They call the same amount of hands against the 15% pot size bet versus 33% pot size bet.
Oh, I would call that an elastic range. Oh, whatever. Semantics, okay.
Maybe I'm confusing something. So is it elastic? If they call the same amount of hands, isn't it?
I don't speak poker with too many people.
Maybe I'm confusing.
Anyway. If I would say they've got an elastic range if like they're going to call a bet no matter what the size is. So that's like an elastic, but perhaps.
Are you saying inelastic or elastic?
Elastic. Like
elastic.
It can move. Whatever. It's semantics.
Okay, what I mean is, let me try to explain it so we don't use the terms. It doesn't matter. If you bet 15%, let's say they call 30% of their hands against the 50% pot size bet, but they also call 30% of their hands when you bet 33% of their hands.
Yeah.
If you bet 33% pot size.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Okay, so why not just betting our bluffs 15% and then our value hands 33, or even then we can also go bigger.
Exactly.
Because the thing is, for recreation, he doesn't understand pot odds. Like maybe he has some intuition. That's where, you know, oh, now it's half pot, 2/3, then things change. But in the long term, it can add up, these small things where you save a bit of money with your bluffs and you extract a bit more value with your value hands.
And can I take an even more extreme example?
Sure.
And say that when I'm playing like a 100K live tournament, I will sometimes open 2.5, 2.7, 2.2 min raise, depending on the spot, depending on, you know, who's in the big blind, etc. One thing I started doing, and, you know, I'm outing myself here and making it harder to do it in the future, is that, you know, if you have pocket fours and you open the cutoff, you kind of want to min raise. Like, you don't care if it goes multi-way, you want to bet at SPR to call a 3-bet. Yeah. So if you have pocket fours, you want to min raise. And if you have ace king, you probably want to like 2.7 exit or something like that. Because you want to play a bigger pot with a hand that you don't want to take multi-way, for instance. Now, if I did that just for, say, one tournament, nobody's going to know which hands I'm doing that with. Like, there's no way they could possibly know. And if I thought they were picking up on it, then I'd just fucking switch it, or I'd just bounce or something like that. So it's not even just against recreational players. Like, against the best players in the world, you can be unbalanced in something as simple as pre-flop. So if you can be unbalanced in pre-flop, imagine what you can do post-flop, where it's like, well, I'm literally only doing this with one hand because it makes sense to do it with one hand. You know, if I have 6-6 on king 6, for instance, yeah, I might double check raise that fucking hand. I'm never doing that and then shove river. I'm literally never doing that as a bluff, but I know that they're not going to fold a king no matter what. So I'm going to do it with 6s. Come at me. And I just think that there are just infinite spots, obviously not infinite, but like very, very, very many spots that come up where you can just literally only do a play with one particular hand, and it's the highest EV with that hand, and nobody's going to know, or nobody's going to be able to figure it out. And if they do, like, hats off to him. Most other people didn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if we talk about preflop in general, I don't know how much you have looked into preflop solves, but it's also something where the way we design our ranges, if you look at the V differences, it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely crazy. Like, whether you flat jack 10 suited or 3-bet very often, it's whatever. And if you change one of the metrics, or just a little bit of the output post flop, you play a little bit more of a passive opponent, more aggressive opponent, you want to change your preflop strategy. So this is something that really bothers me in these days, where I think GTO preflop solutions are good to a certain extent only, though. And this is the same with GTO postflop, because again, we're not playing against perfect. We're not at all. Like, we're so far away playing against players that follow GTO. So one example is also 3-betting those off-suited hands from the big blind against like later positions with like 40, 50, 30 big blinds, which make a lot of sense. But also if you compare them to, let's say, the EV of 3-betting 6-5 suited, because it's important to 3-bet those off-suited combos where we're going to be facing more 4-bet all-in. So it reduces the likelihood of facing a 4-bet all-in. But if you look into the solutions, the counter strategy, the in-position player, he's supposed to 4-bet jam, queen jack suited, king queen suited, suited aces. Usually people
people don't do that.
People don't do that. Like, or some other hands that are like jack 10 suited kind of stuff, you know, suited
and it would be fun to do that if there's even like one recreational player on the table, because
Yeah.
you're like giving up edge.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next. And usually in larger field tournaments, you have 2-3 recreationals. So you're basically putting yourself in a super high variance marginal 3-bet pot that is also now, if called, and this is something the solvers also don't know, that you're going to be called more often than in GTO. That means you have to play this hand more often post-flop. Yeah, and good luck playing queen 4 off post-flop in a 3-bet pot. Pretty sure you're gonna make more mistakes playing this hand in 3-bet pot than, let's say, a 4-5 suited or 6-4 suited. So yeah, I know the stack to pot ratio is smaller, but look, if you compare the EV difference, it's very tiny to begin with. We talk about like 0.2 big blinds or whatever, or even less. If you change some of the response from the in position player, him shoving less and maybe also folding slightly more. But then if we also consider the human component, we're going to be making way more mistakes. And that's why I think like 3-betting those suited connectors is so much better. But again, it's also, just my style of playing, the way I understand poker after playing millions of hands. And I don't want to put myself constantly. And if you play against a good opponent, playing 3-bet pot queen 4 off against Charlie Carrel, I was like, why the fuck would I do that? Like even if I play 10K, there's gonna be 1 or 2 recreations on the table. Why would I play for 40 big blinds and 3-bet a queen 4 off? I prefer taking a 6-5 suited. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be doing less mistakes against you. Where you motherfucker are gonna make my life to hell post flop.
Or just not having a bluff range in that spot and not telling the other person you don't have a bluff range.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. Like I did a population analysis, like these spots are massively overfolded, so it's good to bluff them a lot. But I would simply choose different hands.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the spot. But what I mean is that, like for instance, when I'm playing live, and I really think that the more that edges change, the more you're drastically going to need to change your strategy, which is where GTO just starts being this ethereal thing that doesn't exist anymore because it's so far away from it. Just like I'm not even going to consider it. Yeah. So if I'm playing live, and say for instance I have a good live read on someone to my right, like I know whereabouts in their range they are on most streets most of the time. Like good live reads can get you to that point if you have it on a certain person. So now let's say I know what I can get, like at least 1 3-bet through every couple of orbits. Then I know that they're either going to be calling or folding, usually folding based on where they are in their range from when they open. Imagine, and say for instance, if I get in a spot where I'm on the river and I'm going to be making like 95% accurate reads against this person. There's only one person at the table. Imagine how that changes your strategy against everything else. You just have this EV well next to you. So now when, Timothy Adams opens the cutoff and I'm looking down at ace-6 off and the big blind, I'm like, I don't need it. Like I've got more edge in this tournament just from this one spot. So you can start making ludicrous folds.
Yeah.
So for me,
you would consider folding it or just not 3-betting it?
Just folding it, folding it, making insane folds. Like I've played some spots where I'm cut off versus button and I'm folding like king queen suited to a good reg, to a 3-bet. And it obviously EV is just so high, but it's one of those spots where it's like I've got like 5 recreational players to my right. Like I don't want it. I just don't want this spot. And the low variance and high EV approach of just playing in really good spots, I think is in these big tournaments, just especially with long structures and live, I think it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Man, that's I'm not sure if I would be capable, but I definitely made some sick folds. I think last week on a stream, I folded queens, like under the gun opens, I 3-bet middle position, under the gun 4-bets, I have queens. I'm like, all right, I just leave it.
On a stream, that's brave.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw it. I was like, time bank is going. I was like, you know what? Just don't look at the table. Just being timed out.
Oh man!
I'm timed out. No, but for real, just like the table was incredibly soft. Like if you have players they probably have like -20, -30% ROI in these games, and it just. Well, that's the thing where I think people really struggle giving up a little bit of EV against better opponents. In order to realize way more EV against the weaker opponents. I think there's also comes with a lot of, I want to say wisdom. I mean, I'm not 50 years old, but courage. I think it also takes a lot of courage to say, hey, that's all right. I'm going to give up a little bit here. I might come across as, that they push me around, but I think it's gonna.
It takes a bit of humility as
Yeah.
well to say like, I'm gonna let this reg get the better of me in this spot because I think it's best. Whereas
Yeah.
like your ego would be like, fuck this guy, I'm not folding these jack off to 3-bet, fuck that,
Yeah.
something like that. And may I say first of all, or may I just say, I love the way you're thinking about poker. I think that it's very based in reality, from what I've heard at least. I haven't seen you play poker, I haven't seen you do anything, but I think that this level of humility is really needed within a coach, especially because you'll find so many coaches that are like, no, this is the only good way to play this spot.
Yeah.
And you can say like, hey, this is what I know to be true. Like, this is really like, c-bet this spot against this recreational player. He's going to fold a lot. But then when it comes to like post-flop, it's like, I don't know whether 200% or 100% is better. Like, who fucking knows? Like, nobody knows. But here's the reason why it might be this. And then you can take that concept into the next hand. So I've spoken to quite a few GTO players, and I'm a very, very big fan of the way that you're thinking about it. So
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
I haven't taken your course or anything, but I will now be recommending more people than I would have.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I think it also came with experience that I got to realize, all right, so many students are confused and they have so many different styles. So also if you just look, this is where I don't understand where people that follow strictly GTO, and if you look into the sims and you look at the EV difference of betting 1/3, betting half pot, it's very often very, very similar. On the river, though, when a lot of money goes in with bluffs, there can be some difference that's where we use some heuristics, and this is where we want to be focusing on. To not make these blunders, but there's a lot of room to be creative. You have a few boundaries, and we want to learn these boundaries. We don't want to be, as you said on King 6, you probably don't want to have a lot of bluffs overbet shoving the river. It's probably going to be losing a lot, and we want to learn these spots, where to bluff a lot, where we don't want to bluff a lot, where to bluff coach, where do people have a lot of natural bluffs, and understand, okay, blocker effects in certain spots, and then just playing solid pre-flop, but hammering in on short stack and ICM spots and learning these spots, not making ICM blunders. And then I think this summarizes really well the way I would study, and this is also the way I'm approaching it.
Yeah, no, that's I think I can tell from this conversation that you know a lot about poker that I don't, because you've been studying it a lot more than I have.
I mean, you retired. So, when did you retire? Actually,
I didn't retire. Like I said,
I retired.
Yeah, pretty. I stopped playing and learning like 90%. That was like 3 years ago. But since then I've had like all of my biggest scores.
By the way, I was like, when I stopped playing more, and I'm mainly playing Sundays, it was the same for me. Do you think you have more energy? Well, why do you suddenly have more scores after your semi-retirement than before?
Honestly, for me, it's because I've been cultivating my intuition in other areas of my life. So I've been working on intuitively gauging, relationships or my charity, things like that. So then that intuition carries over into poker. So when I'm playing live, like I just have a really good feeling for when people are bluffing, when people have it, when they don't, and loads of different spots, like when I'm meant to defend, when I'm meant to make a huge exploit folds, things like that. So I've noticed that the more I grow as a person, the more I take out toxic things from my life, eat healthy and exercise regularly and meditate loads, the more my intuition is really attuned to poker, and that's live and online. Actually, something I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to beat the high stakes cash games online.
Yeah, I saw it. How's that going?
Good. I'm probably like break even over like a very small sample. The regs have stopped. Most of the regs have stopped playing me, which is a compliment.
Is it heads up or six max?
This is six max. I heads up's just not my thing. I hadn't known anything about it, but I want to eventually get to the point where I can play the high stakes six max, and I believe that my style of poker can do that and can crush those stakes actually. But at the same time, I'm taking it relatively slowly because it's, I'm doing so much more with my life, and I don't want to be that egotistical guy that thinks he can just jump in and win instantly. Something else I've been going through recently as well is that as new layers of emotions are kind of brought up to the surface, I'll go through like waves of playing really good poker and playing really crappy poker. So I'll try and play a bit more when I'm playing good poker, when I'm like more emotionally in control of my life. My energy's good, so I'm, healthy relationships around me. And then I'll try and really cut it down when I'm doing a bit crappy. The last session I played was 2 days ago. I played a Sunday session, And for most of it, I was just really anxious and really stressed. And I never used to get stressed about playing Sundays. And I think that this one was like a new layer of really caring about the money in a way that I hadn't before, because of my charity and knowing how much money can do for people. And so dealing with that stress and anxiety is amazing for my life, but it was a very expensive lesson. So that I don't know if you ever get periods like that, but it's something I'm going through.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. I think every poker player, I mean, there might be some exceptions, but some prodigies, but I think we all human beings, once we start losing more, then it can get to us. And we start thinking, are we still beating the game? Is there like a major shift in the strategy that we maybe fell behind and we can't grasp anymore? Or are they opponents exploiting us?
It's nice to hear you say that as well. Like I do believe that most emotionally expressed people, because there are a lot of very shut down emotional people in the poker community, which is I think why some of them do so well. It's like they're just so detached from emotion. I used to be like that myself. That they just don't have those ups and down swings of anxiety and stress, or at least they don't feel it. It's nice to hear you say that, because that happens to me all the time, and it's really, I think, powerful for a micro stakes professional to hear you say that, because it's like, well, I doubt, like, the micro stakes player is doubting his game every single day. To hear that you still do it after all of your success, I think it's like, oh shit, okay, this is just a natural thing to go through. Like, it's gonna happen. Like we're gonna feel shit about ourselves sometimes if we're an emotional person, and perhaps you have something from your childhood that makes you feel shit about yourself. Yeah, it's good. It's refreshing to hear you speak about poker. I would be curious how our differences in poker would translate to like an actual hand, like how we would go about thinking about a different spot. So
let's do it. When we like 10, 20 more minutes, let's get in 1 or 2 hands. I think the people would love it. Let me pull up a hand or two that I actually always have. So, by the way, yeah.
Okay, so you've thought about this hand a lot, just to be clear.
Sorry?
Oh, are these hands that you've gone through before, or just new ones?
New ones. I've not looked into solves. I either for content, for paired, or for review. No, but one last thing I wanted to add, what you just brought up, is this is also something where I was always resisting. Is I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be doubting myself. What is wrong with me? And then I started to learn that, as a human being, you will always have worries. You will always be anxious. So now it's more like, all right, cool. You're anxious. Tell me more. Great. So I'm just accepting it. Like, there's nothing wrong about it. I was just wired in a way that this is wrong. This is not how it's supposed to be. And actually, by doing that, I'm less anxious and I'm less worried. Still I am. And if it happens, I'm faster. I'm able to detach myself faster from it, to zoom out and just put things into perspective. And B, also the impact is way less. I'm able to cope with it much better and return to my actual game and rational thought process in order to make good decisions. So I think a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, we're better off with just accepting. Of course, there's some shit, it's like there's always some exception. I don't want to say just accept it, but a lot of like 80-90% of our worries are just not so important. They're just our minds messing with us, our worries, our stuff we predict into the future, or we hang on stuff on the past. And, it's just, this acceptance has really helped me. It was a big game changer for me. And now if you want to put it further, for me and my poker game, so you also listening right now, take it way more serious. So yeah, it was really big for me.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. There's always a rational reason of why being sad or anxious isn't rational. It's there are always justifications of why your life is beautiful, and even if it's not, there's still no reason to be stressed. And I think it's a very powerful tool to be able to feel it, and then, as you said, detach is one way, or like zooming out is another way of saying it, and being able to just see the larger picture and not be zoned in on like, oh, things are bad because I lost a flip, or things are bad because my bankroll's gone down 30% or whatever, and just being like, look outside and be like, oh, the sun's still shining, the birds are still tweeting, and we're all fucking having a great time. So it's And you can go further than that. I mean, you can find Buddhist monks that can go through like concentration camps for 30 years and have come out the other side still compassionate, loving, and not traumatized.
Yeah.
And it's the capabilities of the human mind and the tenacity of the human mind is outside of our realms of imagination, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Charlie, I'm very curious. Don't be too hard on me, but let's look into it. So this hand, we defend min raise. I think any suited hand here from the big one. What would be for you naturally? What kind of hands of 3-bet? You just go with the flow, whatever you think might be good against a specific opponent, or do you have like a strategy that per default you consider at least 3-betting?
So I'd need context. I'd need to know what tournament we're in, how soft the table is, and
so it's a 2K day 2 tournament. Scoop. I think we're like 40-50 left, so we're already in the money. We have a pretty soft table. A bit too easy to my right, and Vea are the only ones that I would consider as like good opponents on this table. The others are known to me. Not that they're bad by any means, but I would just assume they're not like the known high stakes crushers, right?
Yeah, and so if I were choosing my 3-bet range here, it would be very much based on how wide do I think this specific person's opening. If I think that he's just a reg opening, like normalish ranges, then I'd probably really underbluff this spot. Because I think that, given the fact that we have a really soft table, I want to use hands. I want to play big pots of big hands. So I want to play small pots of small hands.
I like that.
If we had maybe even like one recreational player to our right on the same stack as us, then I'd probably just fold this hand. I probably wouldn't 3-bet bluff this spot almost ever. But then again, some people I would just use like a ton of different hands. Like I'd use a ton of different, just like suited kings and just a bunch of hands that have some level of post-flop playability against their calling range and have some level of. I wouldn't go too wild still.
Yeah, I like the idea with the suited kings, or something like, for me, like a queen 8 suited. Like make him fold queen jack off, queen 10 off, still having some playability. Jack 8 suited. I decided to defend. I mean, the bad thing is that actually all three, I think Manu Fedon is also, but he's quite short. I think he's also has been around for quite some time. I think he's also reg. So actually all the guys that I know, like to my immediate right, which is not ideal. But still for 2K, I think it's a pretty good table. I decided to defend, and then he bets this sizing. Cool. Anything you would do different than calling?
Again, it would really depend on what I thought about the table and the spot. Yeah. Like I think check raising here small can be really OP against some people, and against other people it can be really shitty. So I think that against a good player, I'm just check calling most of the time because they're going to be defending enough of their fucking Jack 10 of diamonds or whatever against a small check raise. And then this hand just plays horribly on turns. But against people that perhaps aren't so good, then I'll be check raising pretty much any pair with backdoor flush draw, apart from some like middling 9x.
Yeah. Just to protect against the queen jack, jack 10 type of hands, king jack off, right?
Yeah. I mean, just if you looked at this spot mathematically and you knew that they're c-betting almost 100%, and they're folding a bunch of their hands that they're meant to be defending against a small check raise, you're just printing by check raising pretty much any two.
Yeah. So turn is quite interesting. Would you?
I'd probably consider leading this hand then.
Yeah. No, I think we should certainly have a leading range, right? We have all the 4-5s. We have 9-6, 6-2 suited, which our opponent does not have. I like the idea of leading. Yeah. No, go ahead.
So I think this hand in particular really gets a lot from leading. First of all, you have an easy call against the check raise, against a raise, which is something you always need to be considering when you're creating a leading range. Like, how does your hand play against a raise? How does it play against the call? Second of all, we need a lot of protection, which is, obviously if he checks back something like queen jack, he gets to realize against it's got 6 outs against us, and perhaps might even be able to bluff us off our hand. And obviously we have all the 4-5s and he doesn't. So it's I think this is a good spot to be leading this specific hand. And then I'd also be leading a couple of 2 pairs and some 4-5 for quite a small percentage of the pot, like 20.
He goes ahead and bets the sizing. I didn't lead.
What were your reasons for not leading?
I would have. Yeah, I in hindsight, I slightly prefer leading. I would have just thought that, first of all, this is not being, like, turn leads are not bluffed. Like, if you look in also some solves, it's also that has helped me a lot to improve my understanding of the of this spot to play it very exploitative, is that, if you lead, like, let's say you're 10 deuce suited for protection, or you mix in some 3x for protection, that they're supposed to be raising hands like maybe queen, like just random garbage. It's really hard for him, apart from ace 4 and ace 5, to have natural bluffs, right? So this is where I think it's totally fine to lead hands that we might want to check call, but let's say like an 8-3 suited, right, where, like, okay, I really just want to protect, and I have an easy fold against the raise. I mean, here with a flush on a pair, just of course. But the thing is, like, if we face a raise, he's always going to have value. So 8 deuce in clubs probably benefits from getting in some bluff raises from his king jack off with king and clubs that then blasted off on the club river, right? So. And also, the 8 deuce needs a little bit less protection with the clubs because his queen jack has less outs because the clubs are not live. So this is just my thought process, that I would just like some
one issue I would have is that we're going to end up folding the best hand a lot if we check call.
Sorry.
One issue I'd have with check calling is that we're going to end up folding the best hand quite a lot if we check call, because so many cards on the river, and that are easy to barrel and easy to value bet really thin. That I think, specifically with these kind of hands, even though check calling is an easy decision, we face the river really.
Well, I'm not saying I'm check calling this turn.
Oh, really? We check raise? Nice. I was thinking min raise. What do you think of min raise?
Not really. Well, what do you think about just check ripping it here on the turn?
Check ripping. I think that people over call against a check shove here. I think that people call some people call just basically all of their overpairs, and some people are folding basically all of their overpairs. So it's kind of like, it's very difficult to know who's who in these kind of spots, because you don't know people's tendencies. So I would go for what kind of looks the strongest, and against some people that is going to be check ripping, against some people check min raising. And the cool thing about check min raising is he probably does fold pretty much all of his bluffs, because they're just drawing dead a bunch of the time, and they're not going to be 3-bet jam, and they're not going to be just calling. And then we at least get a chance to hit the fucking river and maybe like check fold against if we don't think he's going to fold. But yeah, I it's one of the spots where if I saw somebody check shove here, I'd be like, I have no idea if that's the best play, and I don't think anyone does.
If you would min raise and he jams on you, would you call?
Yeah.
Okay. So I like it. It's kind of sexy. This is a very, very weird line, but it definitely makes some sense the way you explain it. The reason why I opted to go for the check jam is his sizings. I just think that if you have a very strong hand, like, what is the sizing? Like, you bet 1/3 and you bet this 2/3. I think most of the high stakes regs, they're really good and also very obvious. Not very obvious, but it's a little bit of a tell, I think, when they go for this 1/3, 2/3 turn bet. It's this, let's go for a cheap bluff, like an ace 4, an ace 5, that we want to protect against. Maybe thin value bet with pocket 8s, pocket 7s, an ace 6 suited, king 6 suited, 6, 7 suited. Even if you have pocket 10s, pocket jacks, and then I check jam on you, like I check jam my 2 pairs. I can check jam some sets here. I can check jam my ace 9 still. I probably raise my ace 9, king 9, so I don't really have this on my range. So it's gonna be like a very high equity draw, maybe 7-8 in clubs, or 10-8 in clubs that I floated with, or pair and a flush draw, sets and straights, and then with your overpairs, and there's still like 30 big blinds to call, so it's a bit of a massive overbet jam. And I just feel like that this sizing is never really strong. It's like bluff or a thin value bet that we get him to fold.
So that's an exploit that as in like this sizing on the turn, that's an exploit that I haven't really come across as much as you, because I haven't played too much poker over the last couple of years. So I'm willing to give you that. You sound pretty certain on that. Yeah. And with that assumption, then yeah, I think check shoving here makes a lot of sense. Or like check call and check call rivers for hero if you think you're super over bluffing instead of thin value betting.
Yeah. But these are the spots, of course, where, especially when you play in a more exploitative style and it goes wrong, you start doubting it, right? And this is also the danger a little bit, maybe playing a bit more out of line, or not out of line, but maybe a little more creative, where, naturally we just have an easy check call. But this is where I'm willing to take the risk because, again, based on my experience, if he has pocket queens, he just piles in the pot bet. If he bets 1/3, usually people go for pot over bet turn on these kind of turns.
So if anyone's watching and they want to get Ben's full stack, just 2/3 turns on dry boards, guys.
I'm always revealing my game on Twitch. I'm streaming and like people still do the same shit. So here and there are probably some smart guys and taking advantage of it, but what are the odds that someone is watching this and also then we're going to be playing on the same table, playing this exact same spot? So yeah. But he folded, which I was really happy about. Let me see another. Which one was it? This one? No, it was not this one.
I will say that just judging by that, it feels like you and I think about poker in more of a similar way than I would have guessed.
Oh, I think we do. That's why I wanted you to have you on the show.
And there's some obvious differences, I think, because we've both played, we've had different lives and we have different assumptions and our intuitions will be different. I've put so much thought and so much time into kind of like cultivating my intuition for exactly those kind of spots. And it's impossible to know who's right. And I think it's really interesting that, we came up with like 5 different lines there of how we could play the hand. Mm-hmm. Personally, I really think the ones that I said are, very likely going to be best, but then personally you would feel that as well. So it shows a lot how far poker has to go and how almost like impossible it is to know what's good and what's not.
Yeah. And I'm also not going to put this hand into the solver, because if I put him on the range the way I think he's playing it, of course check jamming is going to be a good play, right? So I don't want to see if it's solver approved.
Right, where the solver says shove and you're like, I knew it.
That's why I'm talking to you. I would go to other poker players and say, do you think, my reasoning makes sense? Do you also see people just usually going for bigger sizing as a value bet, and you see it also more weak? If they say, yes, great, it's human approved. If not, then I need to reconsider what I'm doing. Yeah, maybe I'm having a wrong perception of the way the spot is being played. But I'm never going to be looking up this spot in ever, because it makes no sense. Like,
I'm curious. People in the comments, let us know if you'd like to see me and Ben do some joint classes. see how we both approach a spot, and see if you'd enjoy that content.
Yeah,
because that could be good. I've never spoken to a GTO player that I've been like, hey, we could work together before.
I like both, man. I'm not a GTO player, but I like to have some basic understanding of GTO, but then just take it to the...
man. I think it's so important.
Don't call me a GTO player. I'm going to feel offended.
My bad.
Yeah, but let us know. That's probably, this would be some epic shit. So pocket tens here, a spot that it's not necessarily about this hand, more about the way you perceive these spots in general. So first of all, this squeeze, this guy's, I think he's irregular. I'm really bad in remembering names. If I would see his logo or his avatar, I would probably recognize, and also the tags I have on him.
The sizing just makes me think he's a reg for sure.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how good, but you never get recreational players three bet squeezing this spot that size.
Yeah, that's true. Do you ever consider folding tens here, or?
No. I'm just always calling.
Yeah. Okay. So we call, button folds, flop. I think we have no alternative but calling.
Yeah.
Turn goes check, and then river he goes for the overbet jam. And these are one of the spots where, in 3-bet pots, I'm really curious on how you perceive, even from better regulars, if you think this is something you will see them doing with ace king or ace jack suited, or do you just think it's very value heavy?
So I don't think they'd ever do it with ace king. I think people are really like they like their showdown value in these big spots.
Yeah.
Like if I can win every now and again by checking, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
What I would try and do in this situation is try and understand how another person would think about this spot. So if I would try and put myself in their shoes, but like say they've got here with like a pretty natural bluff like ace jack, and you know they're probably going to be c-betting flop. They're probably going to be checking turn, and then on the river they're going to have a decision. Our range looks like some queen x, definitely for sure. Like potentially we could check behind some queen jack, maybe even king queen. A bunch of pocket pairs, you know, tens, eights. I don't know if you call sevens pre. And then some other perhaps like ace king of diamonds if we don't shove that pre, or like ace jack of diamonds, something like that. And that's kind of it. So then I'd say, okay, would they be perceiving this as a good spot to shove? And I think probably not. I think most people are going to be under bluffing this spot. I think most people, especially with these bet check bet lines where they think they can get heroed quite a lot, and it just feels so stupid to go bet check bet as a bluff and just get heroed by fucking eights. Like people just don't do it too much from my experience anyway, that I would consider this to be one of those spots that people under bluff. Now, this guy in particular might be over bluffing, who knows?
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I would go about doing it. If I'm unsure, then every now and again I'll take blockers into consideration. Like how is our hands play, and that our blockers are pretty irrelevant. You know, a lot of his bluffs that have the 10 of clubs or 10 of spades in are going to be betting the turn anyway. At least a decent amount, and I don't think they're super relevant for, you know, they don't block his value hands or anything like that. So it's to me this is a spot that I would lean towards folding, and probably every now and again keep people honest with some other hero calls. But yeah, I'd be over folding this spot for sure. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think bet check bet in general is a line that is probably under bluffed, not only in 3-bet pots but also in single raise pots. In terms of blocker, like I think I want to be folding queen jack suited. Might be folding a pre-flop because his small blind squeezing range, like it's mostly going to be king queens, king jacks, ace jacks, maybe some jack 10 suited, but even against his weaker part of his 3-betting range, we're often going to be dominated. So I don't mind folding the queen jack suited there. The only bluffs I can imagine, like maybe his ace 3, ace 4 suited, but I don't think he's squeezing that. So it's then ace jack, ace 10 suited, right? That plays this line as a bet check bet as a bluff. So we probably just end up calling ace queen, king queen, and then if we have tens or jacks, I think we just want to be folding it. So yeah, the club is irrelevant, right? But
it's interesting that if you like had this supercomputer that could calculate the EV difference between calling like queen or king queen and tens here, it's probably going to be really fucking close. Like obviously it's better to call king queen, but it's probably still going to be really close because most people are still just going to be super value heavy here. So these are the kind of spots that I might end up just hero folding unless the player's like very good.
Yeah.
And then I'll just end up trying to, you know, call in a relatively.
I think the EV difference between king queen and 10 is probably big, but it's not in terms of like, maybe I misunderstood you, but I think that king queen is still like very close in terms of its gap to break even. I think it's not like making a lot of money.
I think we might be talking about EV differently then, because I'm not talking like if you put it through a solver, what the EV would be for your range for that hand specifically.
Are you just taking? Okay.
I'm talking like reality, like.
Okay. Sorry, then I misunderstood you.
His range is like aces, kings, queens, fucking every now and again a bluff and some ace queen. Calling king queen is still going to be losing a bunch, and then calling tens is still going to be losing a bunch, and the difference between those two things are quite minimal. Whereas, you know, if you put it into a solver, the difference between those two hands is huge.
Yeah. I mean, he could even value shove king queen, right? We probably want to start betting.
That's the thing that really changes it into quite a big thing.
Yeah.
That king queen's probably something I wouldn't fold here.
Yeah. No, it just shows that he can have so much value, and like if he doesn't find these bluffs with ace jack suited and ace 10 suited, then we kind of fucked. Like,
here's a trick for you live poker players out there. In this exact spot, when he 3-bets, c-bets, you call, he checks turn, you got a little trick here. Look like you're gonna bet and gauge his reaction. Because if that guy's really fucking disinterested, and people try and look stoic, but you can tell when someone's really disinterested in a pot. If he's really disinterested, then you check, and then he shoves, and then he looks real nervous, or he looks something, maybe excited, maybe nervous. That's probably going to be a bluff. But if you pick up those chips and he starts looking real like he might shove, then that's one of those spots you can just hero fault the river really nicely. I would love to speak to you about live poker stuff, like live tells. I've gone deeper into.
I have not played a lot of live, man. You're talking to the wrong person, my friend.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful how the theory of poker changes and how many little tricks you can do if you have different tells on different people. And it's like, I really think it's like this unexplored jungle out there where if you can use these tells to your advantage, and if you can gather this data in a somewhat efficient way, even if it's not 100% accurate, which it almost never is, I mean, it's never is 100%, then the theory of poker changes so dramatically. Dramatically. Everything is just, it's new again. It's completely new. So I really think that the next few generations of poker players will just be hammering down, first of all, like spirituality and meditation, mindfulness and things like that, getting on that A game all the time in flow state. And second of all, live tells, I think, are just completely unexplored. Yeah. And I think that it's just I fucking love it. I fucking love it. I haven't had a chance to speak to anyone apart from the other Ben Heath about it too much, because he's the only person that I've really divulged all of my information to. But it's something that just on an intellectual level just fascinates me, just like endlessly.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlie, thank you so much for taking the time today, not only doing the podcast but also the review. There's probably we could keep this podcast for 5 hours, but I have a stream tonight, so I need to prepare some stuff. But I'm really grateful you joined me here today, and we got this finally done. And I'll be following you, and maybe we're going to do another set. Maybe we're going to do some other stuff together. I think it was really exciting. I really appreciate you sharing your insights, and wish you best of luck with your journey with Thrive. And I really hope it's going to be a huge success. I think that deserves a lot of respect from the community. So show him some love in the comments. Not many people are taking so much of their time, energy, and resources to spend it on something where they literally have no financial gain from it. So that deserves a lot of love and a lot of respect. Thank you, Charlie.
And may I say in return that, like, I'd say this with absolute sincerity, that I didn't know anything about you pre this. I'd heard good things, and you really exceeded those expectations. Like
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can really sense how thoughtful you are, which is really rare to be that thoughtful and mindful of like even the smallest things in life. And I really sense that you want to do good in the world. And again, that's pretty rare these days, that people who are hyper intelligent, hyper successful still want to turn their energy towards just doing good in the world. And I think that's hugely commendable, and I fucking love it. So thank you for having me on. And
much.
I hope we can do something else.
I better cut off the stream now, because otherwise I might get some tears.